So Michelle, I'm super happy to have you here. You are the managing partner of aerospace defense and advanced air mobility at Lambert. How long and kind of how did you stumble into this journey of, I won't call it flying cars because I know you say it's not really an industry term.
Well, my journey into advanced air mobility was kind of a little circuitous. I've been a communications expert and public relations marketing for my whole career. The first 20 plus years of that was in real estate PR. So, like placemaking, zoning cases, working with cities and towns, developing really big tracts of land, 8,000, 9,000 acre tracts of land to become communities. When I sold my agency in 2014 to a New York ad agency, and
Congrats.
their focus was something different. And through one of the disciplines that we do, brand journalism, which is kind of syndicating videos to the right people, we got the attention of Bell Helicopter. And Bell was my first aerospace company, and
Hmm.
they wanted some help with a couple of things. One was to launch their Bell Nexus, which was their advanced air mobility solution, and to help them in the communication side of winning the FLRAA, the Future Long Range Assault Aircraft, with the U.S. Army. So we worked on those two initiatives side by side, and the Nexus was my first introduction into AAM. And when they said, and then it was UAM, and I'm like, what's that? I don't even know what that is. And they called it on-demand mobility because then it was like, I'm going to be able to take my app and call it up, and it's going to come to my house. Was what Uber Elevate and all of that was talking about. So
Yeah.
that was my introduction, and from there, I fell in love and worked on several other clients since then.
So with your communications background, how much of a communications hurdle do you think this will be to, inspire people to jump in and lean into advanced air mobility? Because I know like some of the pushback that I hear all the time is like, I don't know if I want to get into a flying car. And I try and kind of communicate like, hey, they're just electric helicopters, they say they're safer. They have redundancies in terms of the engines. Um, is that some sort of a challenge that you see within your work, and like how do you address that?
I do see that as a big part of it, and I think we saw the outcome of that in Paris with the Olympics and Volocopter that made a big deal about flying people to and from the Olympics, and then the community out just outcry was terrible, and they vandalized their headquarters and did all kinds of stuff, and it was because they didn't know, they didn't it's I think that one quote was, we didn't ask for this, we don't want it. And I think
Mm,
that's the thing, like, to have anybody bring new anything to the forefront that isn't asked for, you have to help them see themselves in it. And you can't really do that across socioeconomic paths when you're saying it's going to be convenient, you'll be able to fly over traffic and you're going to love it, when not everyone's going to be able to do that. That's it. That kind of a use might start at a more affluent buyer than a medical services or something like that. So I think
hmm.
helping the neighborhoods where vertiports might go understand what advanced air mobility is, and what it could do for their communities in a positive way, and listen to the concerns that they might have in just not wanting something. We call it NIMBYism in the real estate world. When I was, it's not in my backyard, and it's just when a developer or in this case, an operator might throw something in a community without really gauging whether or not it's needed. And that's like, no, not in my backyard. I didn't ask for that. I don't want it. So the
Yeah.
communication side comes like, let's bring them in to help create what it could be. So create the community around a vertiport. What's that transit oriented development going to look like, where that might go, and what is going to happen here, and how loud is it? I know one thing that Joby spends a lot of time talking about is just their noise profile or lack thereof. Like, you
Mhm.
can barely hear that thing compared to even some of my client helicopters.
Yeah. So I know that's actually one big thing. I remember seeing it was a handful of years ago, but a documentary about the helicopters in the Grand Canyon. And I'm up in Sedona, and we have helicopters
Oh,
24/7,
oh
like
yeah.
365. It's absolutely absurd. And I would love kind of in these national park or national forest regions almost for helicopters to be banned for the sheer fact that like I don't want to hear it. I'm
Yeah.
happy that people are going on those tours and I'm happy that they're doing the sightseeing, but like it's disrupting everybody else on the ground
Yeah.
and it's a constant flow. And especially in a place like a national park where it's a little bit more of a sacred environment. Do you think once these birds get up in the air, like that's going to be a real thing that
I
comes
think it's going to
to
be
mind?
one of the things that helps bring public acceptance, and Honeywell talks about that. I don't know if you've heard Dave Shilliday in some of his discussions, but he lives here.
Hmm.
The Advanced Air Mobility Lab, their business unit is here in Phoenix, and he says, imagine. He goes, I love hiking. I love hiking in Sedona. Imagine that I can be out there on one of my favorite hikes and not have to hear a tourism helicopter go by. And those areas they are sacred, and when you're out hiking you want to be at one. I'm a hiker too, like I want to be there with the land and my thoughts and my dog and nothing
Yeah.
else, and then a tourism goes by. And I'm the same way. Like I want people to experience, especially Arizona. It's so beautiful here,
Hmm.
and I don't want everyone to move here, so come and visit and fly over and then go back home.
Right.
So having a quiet and safe way of experiencing that, I think would be incredible. And I think Arizona would be thrilled to be like the test case for tourism in eVTOLs, just because of how beautiful it is.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point. I know like Phoenix and Tempe has had testing with autonomous driving for years. Like I remember when I was early days at ASU, probably in like 2016, like we had these test cases of these Volvos that were autonomous and the driver was there kind of hanging onto the steering wheel but not really doing anything, and then there's a guy like a programmer in the passenger seat like keeping an eye on his computer. Why do you think Arizona is such a test case, maybe potentially a hotbed for kind of the new age of transportation?
I think, and I spend time with the Arizona Commerce Authority, and who helped bring Waymo to full scalability here,
Hmm.
and talk with them about it. And a couple of things. The weather brings a lot of that kind of testing because there's more up days than down days. And even when you're doing the autonomous vehicles, we don't have many rainy days to test against.
Yeah.
The We have an accepting business climate, meaning that Arizona is very welcoming for new ideas, especially emerging technologies. And we want people to come here, we want businesses to thrive here. And because of those two things, we're more open to getting the policy and the legislative actions that need to happen in order for it to happen. Waymo was 10 years in the making, and there was another one, I can't remember what that was, but Google has more money and more patience and really, leaned into here. And we have a young population, and a young age group is more accepting, especially of that. It's like super cool to try it out. They want to be on the cutting edge, they're early adopters. And that was a major factor too in the scalability of Waymo. And it started in Tempe, and then it,
Hmm.
downtown, and then Central Phoenix, and it kind of went into those younger populations, and then out to the suburbs where the families are. And I live up near Kierland, and they're everywhere now, but last year they weren't everywhere up in this
Yeah.
area.
No, it
So
blows my mind. When I come down to Phoenix, I'm just blown away because it's like almost one in every four cars is
it's
Waymo.
true.
It's
And they're
wild.
using it. The mayor uses it as a talk track for her, just the tourism. Like people want to come here to ride in a Waymo.
I
They're
I tell that to the investors I talk with. I'm like, you guys, like Waymo is here. It's not like some fictitious. This is the Jetsons kind of experience. Like, fly to Phoenix, call a Waymo from the airport, and you can pretty much go anywhere in it. If you've
Yeah,
never ridden in an autonomous vehicle like that, it kind of blows your mind.
yeah,
It's a
and
magical experience for sure.
they talk about it too when they're here. It's
Yeah.
awesome. I love it. I was in Austin for South by, and they're in Austin now too. And they're like, it's so cool. We have Waymo. I'm like, you guys don't even have hardly anything. Come to
Yeah.
Phoenix. They're everywhere.
So I want to get back to the EV tolls, and Joby and Archer have kind of repeatedly said, and it seems like they're pushing back their timeline just a little bit, but it sounds like they're going to be receiving FAA type certification by late 2025, early 2026. We've also heard rumors where these birds are going to start and operate air taxi services in Dubai by the end of the year. How realistic do you think these timelines are? Do you think they're going to kind of continue to kick the can down the road?
I'm not, I don't work for either Joby or Archer or Beta or any of the ones that are nearing FAA certification. I think that it's realistic to think 2026, though. Both
Mm-hmm.
companies have stopped signaling what their type certification dates are going to be. I know that last year we thought it was going to be this year, and but I do think that everybody's getting pretty close. They're accelerating all kinds of testing. Joby just rolled another vehicle off the manufacturing floor, so I think it's their fifth one now. So, like their flight test vehicles are all they've got a fleet. So I think that the certification process with the FAA is hard. I think to do it in the middle of an administration change is hard. To do it with an acting administrator is hard.
Mm-hmm.
So they're very patient. Luckily, they're all pretty well funded. They're public, which helps too, and keeping kind of that pre-revenue like phase. Fingers are crossed that it doesn't have to last forever because everybody wants to start making some money on the vehicles. It takes. I heard somebody at Joby on a panel say that it's nearly $1 billion effort from start to certification for any OEM right
Mm-hmm.
now in advanced air mobility. So that funding is really, really important, and the faith of investors that this is going to be the next big transportation revolution, I think is important.
Do you think there are private companies that kind of have the means and the capital to make it through that process, or do you think at this point, just Joby and Archer, maybe Beta, just given kind of their public road, able to raise that
Hmm.
capital? Wall Street does a fantastic job of providing capital to new innovative ideas. Do you think they're
Hmm.
going to be the ones just for the sheer fact that more people know them? They have a bigger bank account. They can kind
Yeah,
of last this road.
I think that they're arguably farther along in the process too, and
Mm-hmm.
the certification process. I mean, Joby's doing pilot training in its office in Monterey. They're built up a whole program around pilot training, which is probably one of the hurdles that all OEMs will have to go through is making sure that they're. I mean, there are not enough pilots for airlines, and we need to
Right.
now switching over here to AAM pilot training is going to be kind of a big deal. But
How
I
long do
do.
you think until they're autonomous? Is that just like a
Oh, I
total?
think, well, Whisk, I think, will be the first autonomous. They're all being built fly by wire with autonomous capabilities, but all the OEMs that I'm aware of are launching with a pilot.
Mhm.
Whisk has said that they aren't going to come out until 2030s, and they will come out autonomously. And some of the Whisk folks are here in Phoenix, and they're holding true to that statement. So I'm
Wow.
hopeful that. I mean, that's if you think about it, Riley, that's only 5 years,
It's
less
only
than
five
5 years
years.
away. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I
And
feel
okay, so
like
like politics aside, though, do you think the current administration is probably more favorable than our previous administration as far as, I mean, they can't really do anything to help speed along the process. And it also, I don't know if you necessarily want to speed along the certification process, given it is a high risk.
yeah, the safety. I mean, they're
Yeah.
all being certified to the commercial airline 10 to the minus 9,
Uh-huh.
the highest level of certification. So I don't think there's no wavering at all at the FAA on that. That's like the price of entry, right?
Good.
But I do think that this administration has put a stake in the ground that he wants to be first. He wants to have the best. He's supportive of aerospace. He's
Hmm.
supportive of our U.S. military, and I think that shows in the defense budget that hopefully will come through. So I do think that it's a possibility that things once some of this unsettledness settles down, that it'll kind of right itself. But I do believe that this administration does want to have not just air taxis, but to have the emerging technologies that it brings for all the multiple uses. And if you think about it, I mean, air taxi is just one thing. And
Yeah.
if, like, I think it's going to start probably closer on the EMS front, the emergency medical services,
Okay.
and either flying a doctor to a scene where you couldn't get to it because of an accident or rough terrain or
Hmm.
whatever, or taking, organs in some place that have to be accompanied by a doctor.
Hmm.
Drones are part of advanced air mobility, and drone technology is, I don't follow it as closely, but it is exceedingly becoming more longer range, obviously autonomous, and more flight time. I don't know what you
Yeah.
call it in a drone. They're
I
up in
mean,
the air all the time.
zip line is absolutely
I love
fascinating.
them. They're so
Absolutely
amazing.
fascinating. Yeah. And I guess maybe a better question, because even within drone technology, the United States has lagged. I mean, China and DJI, and I know those are more commercial based drones and stuff, but like they seem to be miles ahead of US based companies. Why do you think it's taken so long to see innovation in aviation and specifically in America? Because I even look at like old photos of TWA airlines, and just the experience of that travel
Yeah.
seems like 10 to 100x compared to I actually had to come out to New Orleans here, and I'm just sitting in this small little seat. It feels like it's a plastic lawn chair, and I'm like, get me off of this airplane as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah.
You
I,
know?
I think the short answer is because it's just so dang expensive. Like,
Okay.
innovation in aerospace is really expensive. It takes a long time. The legacy companies they were created around a certain way of manufacturing. How they design aircraft has just repeated itself over and over again. Boeing hasn't created anything new for a long time, and it just canceled its X-66 program, which was going to be their sustainability aircraft. So, and when you look at advanced air mobility and what it projects it can do just for our air quality in
Hmm.
cities, at scale, of course, but regional aircraft too. If that technology is put on a regional jet, even if it's hybrid or electric, and the technology is not going to go backwards, it's going to keep advancing. So even as we're working on these aircraft, the 2030, 2035 aircraft are going to be different, right?
Yeah.
So this is like the minimum viable aircraft right now. And in
Right.
2035, 10 years from now, it could be something that, can go 500 miles or go 700 miles, more regional service. So I think legacy OEMs have a certain way of doing things, and it's like turning a really big ship. It takes a long time to do it. So I think that takes longer. I think the materials that we have now for new aircraft, the technology has advanced. So layering composites, for example, that didn't exist 10 years ago. I mean, airplanes are built out of aluminum. Airplanes aren't going to be built out of aluminum so much anymore.
Hmm.
So I think that it's taken all of the technologies time to do what they do, and then these brilliant aerospace engineers grab the technologies and create an aircraft out of them. So battery power, fly-by-wire, the making even the cabins lighter, taking some pounds off the weight of the jets so that they can be more fuel efficient.
Yeah.
We have a client right now that we just launched the web page on Monday, and their laminar flow technology, they're utilizing laminar flow across the entire aircraft. So not just the fuselage, not just the nose cone, not just the wings, the entire aircraft. So it will be 61% more fuel efficient. So it can use then a smaller engine. It can have a bigger cabin. It has longer wings. It uses fewer parts, fewer fasteners, fewer bolts,
Hmm.
all of that thing. And it doesn't have the surfaces that cause drag on an airplane, and like windows
Yeah.
in this case,
Yeah.
a digital display that's lighter than windows and that sort of thing inside the cabin. So
Yeah.
it's these technologies are just now kind of at aerospace grade, so to speak, where they can be incorporated into new aircraft and emerging designs.
How much do you think like robotics and even the combination of AI will advance kind of the innovation process?
Oh, I think
because I mean,
it'll.
it seems like it's a flash in the pan kind of moment where like we're going to be able to discover things we've never really been able to discover just because human creativity is limited and it takes time to come up with brilliant ideas. And if you're able to
Mhm.
prompt something and it can return 15 or 20 different ideas, I mean, that's pretty
Yeah, well,
powerful.
even deeper, utilizing AI in operation of the aircraft, so to reduce pilot load,
Mm-hmm.
having just um, collision avoidance kind of detection, and that sort of software utilizes AI so that they know what the machine learning knows what to look for when a
Mm-hmm.
pilot might be tired and not seeing something off to the left when he's looking right, sort of thing. The aircraft is detecting it. So I think in avionics, in the software applications, I think AI is going to be utilized all throughout the creation of the aircraft and then the operations of it too. There's a company called Datalin, and I met their US CEO recently at an Arizona Technology Council thing, and she was talking about just that and how they're creating cockpits that are utilize AI in the operation for and predictive maintenance, for example, so that the machine knows that, hey, this has had 20 flights and it hasn't been tested for XYZ failures, so it needs to, and then it'll just test for those failures. Like that kind of AI application is going to be life saving,
Yeah.
and it will reduce the workload of the pilot, which is awesome. Then the pilot's more awake, more alert, and can do his or her job better.
Yeah. So when do you think, like, if I'm in Sedona, I can pull out my phone and, rather than calling an Uber, I call an air taxi, come down to Phoenix Sky Harbor, jump on a plane, never have to like step my foot in a car. Like, how long do you
That would be
foresee
so
that
awesome.
process
I don't
coming
think
to
we're ever
fruition?
gonna get the to whip out our phone and call it to our driveway. But I think what we'll be able to do is whip out our phone, call the air taxi to a vertiport near your home in
Hmm.
Sedona, and then the quick flight to Sky Harbor, where you might go through TSA in Sedona, and you
Hmm.
can just get on airport side inside security at Sky Harbor, and Sky Harbor's working on that already
Okay.
on how those connections can happen. I mean, there a lot of millions of dollars in improvements going into Sky Harbor and a new terminal coming, and I think that it will be vastly improved. But to answer your question, I think that it may not be at scale, but in the early 2030s, we'll see that.
Hmm.
If not before. If we've got first cert next year, let's just play with some dates.
Let's play for some hypotheticals here. I love
Yeah,
it.
let's just dream. If we had first certification as early as next year, and we know that these vehicles will be built in X time frame, let's say by 2027, we've got an operator that buys some, and the operator happens to be in Arizona, and she happens to have FBOs in Sedona and Deer Valley and wherever throughout, and she's got three aircraft delivered by late 27, and Sky Harbor's ready for it. Why can't the onesie twosies start? But I think that the early adopters will take it, and then it's the scalability that we'll have to worry about.
Hmm.
And it will be great to have demand exceed availability, but when demand exceeds, then the price doesn't come down, and then it's not equitable. So I think
Yeah.
we want it to be an equitable form of transportation. I do. That's what I want. I don't want it to be a only the rich guy gets the convenience. Um,
100%. But I
but
think, I mean, that'll probably take time though, right? Because
yeah,
if you just look at the arc of any innovation, when we
yeah,
went from horse and buggy to the
our
automobile,
Apple
it was
Watch
like,
or our Apple iPhone.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was like 1 in 20 families had, an automobile. And today there's what, like 2.2 automobiles per family,
yeah,
So it'll
yeah.
definitely take time. We're talking this as more of like a public service, but do you foresee these vehicles being more kind of in the private side? I mean, I know you touched on they won't go in your driveway, but like, let's say somebody owns a couple acres, and they have
Hmm.
kind of their own vetaport, so to speak. Like,
That I don't know. I think cities and towns would like it to start with it being more regulated to the cities and towns and less
Hmm.
unpredictable. Once it gets into the NAS, it's harder to, how are we going to regulate somebody coming from my driveway and up, and what's their plan or flight path going to be?
Hmm.
I, as again, I'm not an expert. I just talk to a lot of experts all the time. I think that the safety corridors are going to be paramount at first until it does become at scale. So we'll find here in Phoenix probably them flying over highways and across over along the Salt River, where there's nothing. There's
Hmm.
also no water in it, but in other places like Florida, they're planning, along the I-95 in Florida. And Florida is much farther along in their advancement of AAM than we are here in Arizona. They've got the I-95 that is incredibly congested along the west or the east coast of Florida on the Atlantic side. And they've got the flight paths figured out where they're just going to fly right along the Atlantic Ocean just a little bit, and
Hmm.
much safer, at least to start a new technology that way. And the cities and towns are more eager to adopt it. And then just find ways to make it so they're not flying over residential and business areas. So one of the things that was talked about early on in 2018, in the days of Uber Elevate in 2019, was that these aircraft are going to go off the top of a parking structure or off a high rise,
Right.
in a big city. And I think that rhetoric has kind of been slowed a little bit, and they're talking more about single story or smaller vertiport experiences, or turning heliports or FBOs into advanced air mobility kind of hubs,
Hmm.
rather than getting energy, because most of them are electric, right? That's what makes them such a nice solution for urban air mobility, is that they're quiet. Um, so getting electric to the level that it's needed up 30 stories to a top of a building is difficult. So you think about the ripple effects of advanced air mobility and that infrastructure and the energy and what goes around where these vehicles are going to fly to and from is going to be paramount. So I think some things, as we learn more, as the vehicles get closer to certification and we know more about the vehicles, if we as we study what their missions are going to be, we study, what's going to be emergency, what's going to be cargo, what's going to be passenger carrying, what's going to be airport to airport, then it's easier to kind of understand the energy needs as well.
Yeah. What do you think, like, are the massive shifts or unlocks in terms of urban planning from advanced air mobility? Because, like, in my mind, I'm, a very creative dreamer in the sense, like, I see this as almost like a completely different world if these birds are, at scale and this is a viable means of transportation. And maybe I don't even need to own a car. I can just call a Waymo if I need to run down the street. But for the most part, I can just hop in an air taxi and
Hmm.
kind of jump around between cities or.
I love the discussion. I was at CoMotion Miami a couple of weeks ago, and that conference was all about ground mobility. And there's one in LA too. I was speaking on a panel of my company LOIC is based in Madrid. They put me on a panel of span what's happening in urban mobility in Spain. So luckily I knew a couple of things about it, but I brought into the discussion advanced air mobility, and the line to talk to me afterward was huge. Like I had just, uncracked, the fountain of youth or something.
Right.
And it's because they have such curiosity about how they're and trying to solve the problem about how we're going to blend all of these modes of transportation together. So you've
Hmm.
got first and last mile, and a lot of young folks, and me too. I like scooters and bikes and micro mobility. I would,
Walking. I lived
and
in I
yeah,
lived in New York City, and it was so
yeah, we
great not
walk
having a
everywhere, right?
car. Yeah, you just walk. You
Yeah, and
just
it's
walk.
so much more convenient. I love driving, but I drive for pleasure. I don't want to drive for transportation. I want to do other things like, quick stuff on scooters and bikes, get to the vertiport, go where I need to go, probably another like a long haul trip in an airplane, and have the same experience on the other side.
Hmm.
So I think that the ground transportation in cities and towns and the urban planning, like they're having a heyday now that they know about it. In 2018, I was doing a lot of real estate PR, and I went to GAMA, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association, and said, "You have a problem. You guys are creating these vehicles, and they don't have anywhere to land. Like no cities know what's coming." And
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with cities, and no one in their general plan updates that they do every 10 years had anything for a vertiport or emerging technologies from the air. Like none of it was even considered, and
Wow.
that's changed a lot. So
Yeah.
the League of Cities and Towns has gotten involved. The Gamma and other organizations and AUVSI, they've all started to really focus on now what's happening on the ground and how will cities adapt. And there are different organizations, the Urban Planners International. They have the ULI, the Urban Land Institute. I'm a member of that, and I spoke here in Phoenix in last February and introduced advanced air mobility. And again, it was a 10-minute quick hit. Here's what it is. Here's why you need to care about this today, even though these vehicles don't exist yet today in an operable way. And again, out the green room, the line of people like, you need to meet with me and tell me more about that. Like my mind is blown. Like, what is this? And luckily they've paid attention and they're digging in. And a lot of the OEMs put out such great tools for, explainers. This is how you can find this. This is how you can talk to your community. And I have to give some props to Florida because they're doing these charrettes all throughout the state and really bringing the community in, saying, if this technology existed, how might you use it? And just asking the questions and then getting the communities to kind of come in and plan their own community to include advanced air mobility. And they're really interested in the emergency medical services side of it, public safety, and I think, and the cargo, like how we can get these big, trucks off the inner city roads, especially in Miami. It's so crowded. um, that is a welcome thing for them. But they're asking the questions, which is a brilliant way to communicate something that might be coming. It's like, if this came to you, what would you think?
Right. Which
And
I
how
think
would
is
you
so exciting too, because I mean, it seems like we're just in a wide open field where, we get to kind of create our own destiny in that regard. So
it kind of
seeing
is,
seeing
which is
those common themes, you
yeah.
can start to build cities for what people want
Well,
versus
between that
because I actually
and Waymo, if you
yeah.
combine the two, you combine autonomous ground vehicles, autonomous semi trucks. Aurora in Texas is doing autonomous semi trucks right now. We
It's
had a hydrogen
wild.
autonomous right?
It's
A-
wild.
And they've got thousands of miles on it, and no one knew. They
Yeah.
didn't tell anybody.
And
They
I
flew
think
with
that
it.
like you see a lot of pushback as far as some of those autonomous semis and like what that means, but I don't know. I actually did a pretty long road trip a few weeks back, and the amount of times I saw a semi kind of veering lanes and, I'm speeding up just to get by them. Like, I want the machines to be operating those things,
Yeah,
especially
they
if
don't get
I'm on the
tired.
same, yeah, because you can get tired. They're human, maybe they had a bad day, didn't sleep well, didn't get enough to eat. Like, there's so many variabilities when humans are involved that I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm not super excited about that kind of stuff.
And
Do you?
and we're seeing that. I mean, I don't want to compare Waymo with urban air mobility because I don't think it's a good apple to apple kind of comparison. However,
Mhm.
when there are multiple Waymos on the road here in Phoenix, they're predictable.
Yeah.
They're going to do exactly what they're going to do. They've got sensors everywhere. They're going to follow the lights. They're not going to run a yellow. They're like exactly predictable. So you can safely be behind them, beside them, ahead of them, and everything is fine. I can't say the same about my fellow drivers out there sometimes.
Especially in Phoenix. I mean, I've
Yeah.
spent a good time in Phoenix, Scottsdale, and like those highways, I mean, they can be a zoo. They can be an
Oh,
absolute zoo.
you can't go slower than 75 on the 101 or people will honk at you. And the speed
Yeah.
limit is 65.
Yeah. It's an absolute, I mean, much better than LA traffic, but like it's still
Yeah.
absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
Um, and I did, it was probably a couple months ago, I ran into a guy who was a former city planner in Chicago. And we kind of got into this discussion about advanced air mobility and autonomous cars. And he was saying, like, Riley, it's really interesting because when we build a city today, or when we're building a new development, and you might be able to speak more on this, like the first thing we plan for is roads, and like how are we going to get people to whatever it is we're building. And maybe that's not the first priority. Maybe it moves down to priority number 2 or priority number 3. But like, what do you think the ripple effects of even shifting that priority stack from where it is today of how do we get people there via ground travel, ground
Hmm.
transit?
I think I think he's still accurate. The difference is that those roads are multimodal corridors now. So 30 years ago, 40 years ago, they were roads for cars and they were
Hmm.
built for cars. There was not wide enough for a bike lane or a scooter lane. They didn't have the right kind of sensors and things that we need now for autonomous driving, but they weren't pedestrian or micromobility friendly. So while developers now look at it differently and they make sure that there are ride share kind of applications, car share, meaning like Turo kind of things, like the parking of cars that will be shared in a community just for the community, for me to drive one of the borrowed cars. So they're planning for that mobility, but they're planning for it differently. I worked for a developer here called DMB, and they would plan their community first around the vistas. They wanted to make sure that the common areas in their communities had the best view. And then they would build their housing around because they wanted the people in their community to have the same view as the guy that's on the top of the hill that has the best lot that they wanted. So they preserved their best spots for pocket parks and bigger parks and the corridors and walking trails and that sort of thing so that everyone could enjoy it. And I think
That's
that
incredible.
it is
That's
incredible, and it
incredible.
costs a lot. It costs more that way, right? When
Yeah.
you're not selling that multi-million dollar lot to someone who can afford it, but turning it into a park.
I bet
Um,
it's a much happier place to live though. Even
it's
for everybody in the, the wealth demographic. Like I'm
Yeah,
sure
because
just
anybody
the
comes
energy
to
around
visit.
there's yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's turned to be really beautiful. Those developers are turning their attention now to these trends. I was talking with someone today about a big development on the west side here, and they're thinking about, because they're so far away from the downtown Phoenix, they're thinking about what they would put for an eVTOL kind of experience to get people to and from faster without congesting I-10 that's already so congested west and east to get to these, more outreached communities because they're typically sprawl communities are less expensive to buy a house. You get more house for your money the farther out you go from a city center.
Hmm.
And so a lot of folks before the pandemic would live out there and then work more central. That's changed too. The pandemic had tremendous impact on where people live and work. And so are
I
you one
left
of them?
I grew up in Colorado, but I was living in New York City. And then we went work from home for one day. And like I was in my apartment in Brooklyn, pretty much opened my laptop, bought a ticket, went back to Colorado, and then over the course of the years I ended up here in Sedona. But like yeah, I pre-pandemic I
Wow.
was living in the city. And I don't know if I would be where I'm at without kind of that rapid jolt.
Yeah, you were
So
smart. You were really smart. I mean, I would have lost my mind being in the city during the
I would have
pandemic.
lost my mind. I mean, I grew up in the mountains. I like my open spaces and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So like it took me like 5 minutes to realize like this, even for 2 weeks, this is not going to work. Like I'm not
Good.
going to be able to handle it. And it
Way to
turned
know
out,
yourself. That's
yeah,
awesome.
well, yeah, sometimes a little bit impulsive, but,
So
um,
I think too, when we're talking about ripple effects of this particular industry, developers, and it kind of combines what's happening with office. So offices used to be built with huge parking lots or parking structures around them. And they were designed for parking because the worker had to come, had to park, and then go in the building and work. Pandemic changed that, and micromobility is changing that, ride share is changing that, and advanced air mobility is changing that. So now an office developer can have a much smaller footprint. I still encourage people to come to an office setting to work because we need each other. Us, working in our apartments is not healthy
Yeah.
solely, but having that smaller footprint because it doesn't need as many cars and
Hmm.
not building specifically for individual occupant cars. And that's a
Hmm.
shift that we're seeing happening. And it's kind of across the all modes of transportation. So light rail is having an impact, different public transportation as we get bigger, at least here in Phoenix, we're catching up with some of the cities that are denser and needing to have less dependence on our single occupant vehicles. But the city planners and developers and architects are now really thinking about what's that building footprint and do I need a parking lot that big because people are taking Uber or Lyft, they're taking, their rideshare car, whatever they're doing, and then the inclusion of advanced air mobility and a vertiport nearby, they just have to worry about what that, extra block or two, and we can walk that. And our city, Phoenix, is putting in more shade just for that, like putting in more trees and shade structures and things like that that will make it a more walkable city.
I mean, it's really exciting. I don't know if you feel this way, but I definitely think we're like entering into the golden age of not only transportation but aviation,
I
and
think so.
I don't know what kind of ripple effects that's going to have. I mean, I'm definitely more like I always go back to Nikola Tesla's quote about like if you want to understand the laws of the universe, you have to think in energy, vibrations, and frequencies. And like
Yeah.
I just know when I drive in Phoenix, I have so many little microaggressions because somebody cut me off or somebody blows by me at 85 honking at me because I'm going 71 and
Yeah.
like what happens when we kind of take away all of those little microaggressions at scale across the world, like I don't know, it gets me really excited.
I think humans will look for them. We'll find
We
another one.
will,
I
hopefully
hope that. I'd
not.
rather we are more meditative, right?
That's right, that's right.
Yeah,
So with these EV tolls though, is it all eyes in Dubai as far as where we think the air taxi services will launch first?
the first.
Is that kind of what the industry
I
is
think
looking for?
so. There's a lot of energy going toward first commercialization there.
Hmm.
The governments want it, they have the money to do it. And their certification process is different than here. Not that it's less safe, because I don't believe that it's less safe. I think it's less
It's
bureaucratic.
different.
Yeah.
It's just different.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think if you talked with each of the top three, they've all been investigating. The one I met with today, not of the top three, just got back from Saudi Arabia a couple of weeks ago. There's the Middle East has a significant interest of the U.S. right now in terms of our OEMs wanting to make sure their vehicles, what they've planned for them, can happen. And the
Hmm.
missions, I think, will probably be different. It'll probably start more air taxi there than it may here. But that remains to be seen. I think
Yeah.
depends on, again, the OEMs aren't necessarily the operators, so it's who buys these aircraft and what their plans for them are,
Hmm.
and how they're going to use them. And I think most operators, if I were counseling them with my lack of expertise on aerospace, I would say maybe have a fleet of different kinds of eVTOLs or CVTOLs, the conventional or the short takeoff and landings, whatever. Like bring an Electra in with a Joby so that you can do different missions or different, routes. I always speak in military terms. I don't mean to. But using the vehicle for different reasons, use it for what it's well suited for, not trying to make it do something that it's not well suited for. Most of these eVTOLs they're going to be short hops. They're going to be short distances. They're not going to fly high. They're not going to fly fast. They're battery operated. And so they're made for that. But you bring in a hybrid vehicle, like Vertical just announced its hybrid, and it'll be a longer range today or yesterday, whenever they announced it. And you bring in that, or you bring in, a fixed wing, not just and the rotors are in a different spot, or it has no rotors, and you've got a well, kind of a well. balanced fleet of vehicles to do different things. And honestly, I think that we can't not talk about. I haven't talked about drones because I don't live in that world very thickly, but drones are going to be part of what drone operations will happen at FBOs, I predict. And the way that Zipline has done theirs, for example, they have their own places, and they're especially in Rwanda, their operation there is so slick in what they do with medicine and medical equipment, and or just their deliveries and how quick they can operate that, a 90-second turnaround or something just crazy, right? The doctor calls, 90 seconds later it's packaged up and off it goes, and it's in Africa. Like, why are we doing that here for medical? I don't need to do that if I'm just
I don't need that for Amazon.
yeah.
I don't need instantaneous delivery from Amazon, but
Yeah,
correct. For
exactly.
medical, for emergencies, like
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
life-saving.
yeah. I
It's
think that
life-saving.
is good use of time, energy, venture capital, all of it. Like, put money towards saving lives.
Yeah.
But Amazon Prime is testing out in Tolleson. Like, it's a real effort to do deliveries by drone here, and they're coming out of their warehouse and then dropping in somebody's yard and going back. And I think there are some applications for that as well. But the whole ecosystem is what's going to be fascinating as we wrap in all of these air vehicles. We wrap in micromobility, we wrap in rideshare and autonomous vehicles. And what does a city look like?
Yeah.
What does the future city look like when we have that? What does a rural city look like, or a rural town, a rural community that couldn't get a Walmart there? Like, can they now get essential goods during a storm or something where they, would have to travel a mountain road? You grew up in the mountains. They can be treacherous in weather, but perhaps a sturdy drone can deliver something life-saving, when it's impassable.
I mean, I know a lot of people don't like to use, especially in markets, because it's a little hyperbolic, but like, I really think we're on the cusp of an industrial revolution. And like
It
what
is.
the world is going to look like in 50 years is literally up for grabs,
I know, and I
So,
won't be here to see it. It makes me so sad.
well, we
Maybe.
don't know that. We don't know that.
Well, that's true. Things are
Maybe
advancing.
things are advancing fast. So you might be able to take a pill and live forever if you choose to do so. All right.
Yeah.
I have one last question. I mean, we were talking about Dubai and stuff. If these get certified and they start launching air taxi services, how long until you just take a flight out to Dubai just to see it for your own eyes?
Oh, me personally go out
Yeah.
there? Probably really close to after it's certified and commercialized.
Yeah.
I think I would be on, yeah. I
I
I need
definitely want to be on the
I
short
need
list.
to. Like, I want to be one
Because
of the
like
first.
you've been in this space for what,
Like, 8 years.
7, 8 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We need to see that come to fruition. That's a lot of
Yeah.
work for nothing really material yet. So
Yeah, I was saying that to the my lunch date today and saying I have to go. Like,
you have to
how
go.
do you not go? And whether it's, just to go across the city or get from the airport to some place that I didn't know I had to be. But I think I'll be first here for sure. Like,
Good.
yeah.
Well, maybe we can coordinate and jump on the same flight from Phoenix
Hey,
because
most of them are 4 passengers, so let's do it.
I'm definitely going to be there. Like I've already told the guys I work with, like I'm going to Dubai. Like the second these things get certified, like I'm buying a ticket and we're going to go check it
Off
out.
we
So
go. And while we're
yeah.
there, let's go to the tallest building and just to feel its sway.
Oh, I don't know if I would like that. Honestly, I don't know if I would like that, but I'll
Uh,
fly around it. We can take the eVTOL
oh,
and
there
fly
we
around it,
go.
right?
There we go.
Yeah,
We can watch it sway.
that's right. That's right. Well,
All
Michelle, thank you
right.
so much for doing this. This has been such a pleasure.
Oh, it's been fun. I love talking about advanced air mobility and what's coming next, and just how cities and towns are going to function and how people are going to accept it once they can see themselves in it. We
Yeah.
need to invite them in, right?
Yeah.
We can't just say, "Hey, here's a taxi, jump in." We need to
Right.
invite them to be part of its development.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it takes a lot for people to make the connection of like, they drive a pickup truck to we're going to have flying cars. And I hate to keep using that term, but
I
that's the
know,
term
but
that
it's a
always
big,
gets thrown out.
yeah.
because there's so many steps, and like you're saying, watching all these things converge, like the confluence of all of it, like we don't know what's on the other side. So it's a
Yeah.
really exciting time.
But you are part of creating it. By having these conversations, you're manifesting it. So keep
Yeah.
on keeping on.
I plan to. I plan to. Like this stuff really gets me going. So
Good.
yeah. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and I guess what's a good way for people to follow you, find you? Do you put
Um,
out a lot of stuff publicly,
yeah,
or
on LinkedIn mostly.
okay?
So I might think my LinkedIn is Olson Com.
Hmm.
So just all
I'll
one
add it
word.
to the show notes. I'll put
Okay.
up some notes and kind of
Yeah.
some
And I'm on
chapters and
Twitter,
stuff.
but I don't, or on X, I don't go there very often anymore. So mostly on LinkedIn
Okay.
or my email address. If you want that, you can add that to the show notes too.
Okay.
I love talking about this stuff and connecting people in it.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
an
you
important
should
thing.
jump on Twitter more because I I'm such a proponent of Twitter because I
Okay.
basically built my entire network. Like I said, I grew up in Colorado, didn't really know anyone in the financial services industry, and I don't know. There's an amazing community on Twitter, and like
I'll go back. It got so hateful. I just had to turn it off.
it
But I
gets
wasn't
really
really
hateful,
about
but just keep bookmarking all the things that you love, and then eventually the algorithm will
to
learn to
find
not
me.
deliver the hateful content, and
Okay.
it'll
Okay. I'll
it'll
do
just show you cool things within aerospace and defense and
that. Okay.
robots and flying cars and all that fun stuff.
I
So,
pledge to you that I will go back, give
okay,
it another shot.
sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Michelle.
Thanks, Riley.
I hope to talk to you soon.
Thanks for inviting me. This was really fun.